everybody, and welcome back. We are pleased to welcome attorney Robert David to Power of Attorney. Our hot topic today is medical malpractice, and we have certainly heard the stories of lives that have been lost or injured because of medical mistakes. Perhaps it has happened to you or someone you know. Well, what should we all know when it comes to this area of the law? Attorney David is here to help us all out.
My friend Robert David has been practicing law since 1969 and has been named by the Woodward and White Law Guide as one of the best lawyers in America 16 consecutive times. Robert, thanks so much for being with us here today. It's really a pleasure to have you here to discuss this topic.
Good to be here, John. Thank you.
It's a big topic. It's a serious topic. So let's just start with the basics. We've heard the term medical malpractice, medical negligence. Are we talking about the same thing? And what are we talking about?
You are. Medical negligence, malpractice are the same thing. They both mean departure from the right standard of care. It's good medicine versus not good medicine.
Mm-hmm. And it happens often.
Yeah, and just to add to that, basically, we're not talking about Monday morning quarterbacking here. Everybody knows doctors are only able to do so much. Mm-hmm. If you get a bad outcome, that doesn't mean medical negligence or malpractice. It's when a doctor does something that no doctor is supposed to do. If the doctor goes left, but every doctor who's worth his or her salt knows to go right, and a harm results, that's medical malpractice.
Yeah.
To try and say it in a different way.
So give us some idea, because I came across a really alarming statistic that was put out by the Institute of Medicine. It reports that between 44,000 and 98,000 people die in the United States in hospitals yearly because of medical errors. How serious of a problem is it here in Louisiana?
I'd say Louisiana is no different than the rest of the states. It's pretty much the same everywhere. You divide 50 into that number and you'll get the number in Louisiana.
So thousands of cases.
Thousands.
Thousands of cases. And in many instances, are cases going unreported?
Most of those cases that you talked about, Harvard did a study about this, and they said that, I don't remember the exact number, I think it's about 80-something% of the cases are not sued upon, mm-hmm. whereas 20% are. Mm-hmm. And that many of the cases that they investigated where there was no malpractice do get brought into litigation.
Yeah.
So just to add to that, because I also in my office work in the field of medical negligence, medical malpractice, and I've worked many times with Robert David on medical malpractice cases. Many people, they don't know that the bad that resulted came from negligence. Mm-hmm. They're not doctors. How would they know? Number two, people who suspect that there's medical negligence, they say, well, what can I do about it? I don't know how to do anything about it. What ends up happening is only a small percentage end up going to lawyers who practice in this area. And then many lawyers say it's a close call. And even if we think something went wrong here, the medicine is, it's hard to nail it down. So, but most people never figure out that something that should not have gone wrong, that could have made the difference, went wrong. That some doctor, a hospital, somebody is actually, they committed negligence, and maybe the person would still be alive, or maybe that person would be doing much better but for this negligence.
So how do we deal with that? Because there is a statute of limitations on these types of cases, correct?
A very strict and short statute in Louisiana. You have 1 year from the date of the malpractice within which to file a claim, or else you lose all your rights, or 1 year from the day that you knew or should have known. But under no circumstances can it be more than 3 years from the date of the medical negligence.
So, wow, it's really, when you think about it, it's not that much time. I mean, if you have a family member who passes away as a result of a medical error, it may take you a while before you even decide to look into that case. Or we certainly have heard of cases where people have been walking around and they've had sponges or instruments that have been left behind as a result of surgery. But you're saying, let's say something like that does happen, and that's not discovered until like 4 years after the incident. Am I just out of luck?
You are out of luck. I regret to say that I've had some cases like that where people have presented where it seemed to be a case of malpractice, but more than 3 years had gone by. It's all over.
There's nothing that can
your
be done.
case will be dismissed right after you file it.
Right. So let me emphasize that point, because a lot of times it's confusing to people who don't practice law. Mm-hmm. Maybe you had a surgery, before the surgery, the doctor has, he or she has the sponges, and they count the sponges before surgery. I got 15 sponges. They use the sponges to soak up the blood so they can see what they're doing. At the end of the surgery, before they sew you up, they count the sponges again. If they don't have as many sponges at the end of the surgery as when they started, they don't sew you up. They got to get the sponges. That's an easy example. They don't count the sponges. They sew you up. You don't notice the sponge in your stomach or whatever part of your body. 2-3 years can pass. You're feeling a little bit funny, or you go get an X-ray for something else, appendicitis. Hey, you got a sponge in you.
Discover it.
3 years after the fact, our legislature passed a law for doctors and hospitals saying that's too late. Now, but let me ask this, Robert. Some critics will say, well, you know, doctors, they're not gods. They can only do so much. They spend a lot of money getting their education. They deserve it's not like a car accident case. They deserve to have some of these, call it special treatment. This 3-year rule doesn't apply if it's a other type of injury. If you build a building and the building has defects in it that nobody discovers for 5 years, you can still be sued. But the critics say, you know, doctors, they're under a lot of pressure. They deserve this special treatment. What do people on the side of the injured patients say in response to that?
Well, if any one group has been given special privileges and protection, it is the healthcare industry. Not only is the statute of limitations quite short, but there's a cap on damages, a small cap on damages. In 1976, a law took effect that said that no matter how serious your injuries, no matter what your wage losses are, the most you can ever recover is $500,000. It was later amended to add medical expenses. Today, it's still $500,000. And today's dollars are not worth what they were in '76. So if in 1976 it was fair to cap damages at $500,000, today that $500,000 is the equivalent of $125,000.
Wow.
Well, let me ask you, I'm going to play devil's advocate because I represent injured people, and I have personal opinions aligned with the injured people, but the critics would say, well, you know what, this is a tough economy, medicine costs so much money, if we don't put a cap on medical expenses, people won't be able to afford medical care, doctors won't be able to afford doctors won't be able to afford insurance, malpractice insurance. We have a chart that talks about this, but I'm going to let you get to that chart. I don't know if you've seen this chart. This chart we put up on the screen, our researchers found a chart that says of all the money that goes towards healthcare costs, the money that is actually spent to pay medical negligence claims as of 2007, 0.3% actually went to pay medical negligence claims. How does that fit in with this debate?
0.3% is a pretty small number when you stop to think of how much the injured victim is injured a second time. Because in that 0.3% is included the amount that they pay their doctors to defend them. And I'm just going to take a guess that that's half of your expenses right off the bat. So that number is really not significant in the overall global picture.
These cases are very expensive to bring forth.
They are quite expensive. Before, the lawyers who know what they're doing in this field of law, before they will file a claim against a healthcare professional, will get the file reviewed by a doctor. It has to be an out-of-state doctor most of the time because Louisiana doctors are loath to testify against other Louisiana doctors. So these doctors will charge several $1,000s to review a case on top of the cost of getting the medical records. So before you even take a case to panel, you should know that you have one.
Right.
You shouldn't file frivolous claims.
We're running short on time for this segment, but you make an interesting point. Before you could bring a lawsuit in the courthouse like you would with just about any other case, doctors, medical malpractice cases against hospitals, doctors require that you go to a medical review panel. Why don't you define what a medical review panel is, what it's for?
Before you can file a suit, this is another protection that the healthcare professionals enjoy. You have to first present your case to a medical review panel, a panel of 3 healthcare professionals, almost always doctors. One appointed by the patient one appointed by the defendant or defendants, and a third appointed by those two. You then present evidence to the panel in the form of written documentation. There can be no live appearances, but you can present testimony by deposition. They decide whether or not there is a breach of the standard of care. But whether you win or lose at the panel stage, you are still entitled to file a lawsuit.
So it doesn't prevent you from moving forward with your lawsuit.
Correct.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it right there for right now, but stay right there because we have to take a short break. But when we come back, we're going to take your questions about medical malpractice. Stay tuned. We'll be back in just a moment.